Claire couldn't unclasp the child's small hands. She didn't have the strength for it. She remembered promising herself not to cry so as not to upset Mary even more, but the tears streamed down her face anyway. "This is necessary, this will be better," she tried to convince herself, yet she couldn't loosen her embrace and let go of the thin child's body. She listened to Mary's heart beating loudly and rapidly, fearing that her own heart wouldn't hold out and would stop right then. The farewell scene was interrupted by Mary herself. She suddenly pulled away from Claire, took her face in her small hands, and looked into her eyes with her enormous gray eyes. "Mom, Claire, don't be upset. You told me yourself that the main thing is that now you have me, and I have you, and we'll be together anyway. You'll figure something out, right?" And she stroked Claire's head the way adults usually stroke children to comfort them. Here was this girl with a completely unchildlike gaze, consoling a grown 45-year-old woman. Claire finally found the strength and released her arms. Mary walked to the exit. At the door, she turned and looked at Claire. There was no reproach in her eyes, only sadness and some infinite angelic understanding. How could she leave this little one now? Claire understood what Mary was feeling, for she herself knew firsthand what it was like to live in an orphanage without knowing her father or mother. Claire had been a bit older than Mary was now when she vowed to herself to stop waiting and hoping that one day her mother would find her and take her away from there. Before that, she often dreamed of standing in a huge empty hall by the window. Then the door would open and a woman dressed like a fairy would enter the hall. Claire couldn't see her face, only understood that she was very beautiful. The woman would take her by the hand, and they would leave that empty, cold hall together. When Claire decided not to wait anymore, she stopped having dreams altogether. Claire studied well. Everything came to her surprisingly easily. After school, she entered a pedagogical institute, dreaming of never returning to the orphanage walls, imagining she would work in the capital at some school or lyceum. But wherever she applied after graduation, employers showed no interest in an orphan girl, even with a red diploma. Despairing of finding work in her field, she accidentally met the director of the orphanage where she had grown up, Gloria Tarasova, remembered the diligent and neat Claire, and offered her a position as an educator in her native orphanage in the provincial town. Claire agreed, thinking it would be temporary, but gradually she abandoned the idea of finding another job and moving to a big city. Gloria Tarasova, an experienced pedagogue, knew what she was doing by inviting her there.
It was going to be a very long work process, so the director arranged for the builders to stay nearby the orphanage, and they came to their dining hall for lunch and dinner. That's where Leonard and Claire met. She immediately liked the thoughtful, quiet girl, and he didn't miss a chance to cross paths with her. He himself was her complete opposite, a joker and a merry fellow, everyone's favorite. Leonard also caught Claire's attention. She secretly watched the guy, how everything came to him so easily. He lived as if playing and worked the same way. And so Claire, passing by the construction site once again, got lost in watching how Leonard skillfully laid brick after brick. And then he suddenly turned to her and smiled so radiantly that Claire, usually serious and even stern, suddenly smiled back. "Hello, Claire," Leonard said. "I was wondering why it got so bright, like the sun came out. And it turns out I was right. Here's the little light." Claire blushed from embarrassment. No one had ever called her that before. "How about we go to the movies?" Leonard continued quickly, realizing he needed to seize the moment while the girl was flustered. "There's a new film at your cinema." "I don't have time," Claire said uncertainly. She had already forgotten when she last went to the movies, probably with girlfriends during her institute days. "Then we'll do all your work together afterward," Leonard declared cheerfully. "It's settled. Meet at the cinema tonight." The girl agreed. They started dating. In him, she found the warmth and soulfulness that had been missing from her entire previous life. At first, she couldn't believe this happiness. Perhaps her joyless orphan childhood made her doubt it. She was also bothered by Leonard's lightheartedness and constant bravado. But gradually, she got used to him, and then fell in love with all the strength of her unspent feelings, the way only orphanage children can love, no matter how old they are. Claire was used to keeping all her emotions inside, and didn't show how much she worried, realizing that Leonard's assignment was coming to an end. In the last few days, she ate almost nothing and hardly slept. When all the construction work was done, Leonard proposed to her. Claire was on cloud 9. She loved, she was loved, and she would never be alone again. Leonard said he wanted them to stay in her native town. They were to live in the dormitory for orphanage staff. Considering he was a city guy and had lived in the capital until then, albeit with his mother in their 2-room apartment, this might seem strange to anyone else, but not to Claire. She was head over heels in love with her Lenny and took any of his words, actions, or decisions as a given.
Leonard also suggested having the wedding there. Before the event, he said it would be good to visit his mother, introduce Claire to her, and invite her to the wedding. But he suggested it with such reluctance that Claire tensed up for the first time. Could her beloved be ashamed of her? But she immediately dismissed those thoughts, deciding it was her imagination. She finally calmed down when she met her future mother-in-law. Faith Sergeyevna welcomed them very warmly. She fussed around, treating her girl as she immediately started calling her, and only on the last day of their visit did a strange conversation occur between her and her future daughter-in-law. "Did Lenny tell you about himself? About his problem?" Faith Sergeyevna asked when they were alone. "What? I don't know anything," Claire replied, confused. At that moment, Leonard entered the room. Faith Sergeyevna fell silent, and Claire never dared to ask what her future mother-in-law meant. Very soon after they got married, Claire understood what problem Faith Sergeyevna had tried to tell her about. Leonard drank. Not just a drink on holidays, not a glass or two over Sunday lunch with family. He drank hard and binge drank, at first for a few days, then a week, and later even 2 or 3. Despite his young age, he had been treated several times in a narcology clinic for alcoholism. The treatment helped only temporarily. In one of those sober periods, Leonard got a job at a construction company, and that's how he met Claire. Claire learned to recognize infallibly when that dreadful period was starting. From the cheerful and affectionate Lenny, nothing remained. Rude, harsh, embittered, he came home and began mercilessly venting all his hatred for the world on Claire, humiliating and insulting her in every way. Orphan was probably the mildest term he called Claire. When sober, he begged for forgiveness, crawled on his knees, and still called her his little light, the only sunshine in his life. Almost 10 years passed in such hell. At first, Claire still loved Leonard. Then it was no longer love, more like pity for a gravely ill person. He understood this and raged even more. Claire didn't get pregnant from Leonard right away, and later decided she had no right to give birth from him and make a little person unhappy. More than once, Faith Sergeyevna asked Claire for forgiveness for hiding the truth from her before the wedding. "We sent Lenny for treatment, but it was all in vain." They had been through a lot together, and Claire considered her mother-in-law the closest person. One day, Leonard raised his hand to Claire. He hadn't dared before. The next morning, Claire filed for divorce, and no pleas worked anymore. After the divorce, Claire recovered slowly. Her soul felt like scorched earth, as if she had no feelings left. Just like in childhood, when she decided not to wait for her mother, she stopped seeing dreams, smelling scents, and distinguishing bright colors.
The children helped her emerge from this nightmare. She seemed to forget herself with them. And then, when the first pain subsided, she began to understand that she couldn't, simply had no right to pity herself. She was an adult. She would cope. But these little ones had no one to help them. The children think they're somehow to blame for not having a mom or dad. They don't realize that the adults are actually at fault. At the same time, Claire managed not to let any of the kids into her soul so deeply as to give hope that she would become a mom to one of them. She understood too well what it meant to disappoint a child who had already been betrayed once. That's how it was until Mary appeared in her life. She was transferred from another orphanage. Claire remembers their first meeting. Thin, with skinny elbows and knees, Mary looked about 8, though she was already 11. She looked at Claire with those huge eyes and suddenly asked, "Tell me, has something happened to you?" "No, Mary. Why do you think that?" Claire replied, surprised. "You have eyes like a wounded bird. I once found one like that in the other orphanage and healed it." "Everything's fine, Mary," Claire suddenly said in a new voice. "Don't worry about me. And still, I'll worry about you. It's very important to have someone who worries about you." Claire didn't know what to say then. She only felt something inside her first clench painfully, then warm up, as if thawing. And from that moment, it was as if she had been replaced. Suddenly, her whole life took on a completely new meaning. This little girl with a big heart occupied all her thoughts. They talked for hours, and both Claire and Mary understood that they had found each other. Claire began collecting documents for adopting the girl. She was no longer frightened by the lack of her own housing, or that she wasn't married, and that both facts could play a role in the complex bureaucratic process. She knew she would go to the end and was more confident than ever that she would succeed no matter what it cost. And then, like a bolt from the blue, a letter from her former mother-in-law. She wrote that she was very ill, that her son had been missing for several years with his new companion, unknown if he was even alive. The elderly woman asked, even begged Claire to come to her. She wrote that she would never have bothered her if not for extreme circumstances, and that every day could be her last. Claire wasn't indifferent to her mother-in-law. She had truly treated her wonderfully, and it was sincerely humanly pity for Faith Sergeyevna. She couldn't ignore her request and not come. But Claire's heart was breaking whenever she thought about the upcoming separation from Mary, and the adoption process would be paused for some time. Nevertheless, she told Mary everything. This child, wise beyond her years, took the news of the upcoming separation so maturely, and now she was seeing off Mom Claire, even comforting her. It tore at her soul, but Mary was piecing it back together again. When Claire arrived in the capital to her mother-in-law, she saw that things were really bad. Faith Sergeyevna was very weak, barely getting out of bed. When she read the diagnosis in the medical record, she was horrified. Even without medical education, she understood that she didn't have long left. She couldn't leave her mother-in-law in such a state. She was all alone, no relatives except her missing son. Claire hadn't taken vacation for several years. There was no need. By phone, she arranged for a long-term leave, explaining the situation. What upset her insanely was that she hadn't seen Mary for so long already. Claire was even more distressed, thinking about what her poor girl was feeling now. She told her mother-in-law about Mary. She looked at her with a long, thoughtful gaze and said, "Don't worry, dear, I'll help you." Claire looked at her mother-in-law and stayed silent. Probably Faith Sergeyevna's mind was clouded by the illness. How could she help her? It had been a month since Claire had been living with her former mother-in-law. She cared for her, cooked meals, went to the store and pharmacy for necessary medications. The medications were very expensive, and Faith Sergeyevna's pension was quite small. Twice during this time, money transfers came to her bank card. She told Claire about it herself. Money came, you can go shopping. Claire just silently wondered who this mysterious benefactor was. Could her wayward son's conscience have awakened? But one day, Claire realized how mistaken she was. On a Sunday afternoon, the doorbell rang. Claire went to open it. At first, she didn't recognize her former husband in this sloppily dressed, unkempt, prematurely aged man. And in his youth, he had been a real handsome. Next to him stood a woman to match, and Claire's little light broke into a drunken smile. "Leonard, what brings you here?" "Oh, little light," squealed his companion. "Lenny, what's this? Who's this woman?" "That's Claire," Leonard mumbled, and waved his hand in front of his nose, as if shooing away an intrusive vision. "My wife." "And who am I then?" the madame screeched even louder. "You said we'd live with your mother." "Move aside," Leonard, apparently coming to after the first shock of the unexpected meeting, pushed Claire aside and entered the apartment. Behind him, hissing something angrily, waddled the woman reeking heavily of alcohol. These two barged unceremoniously into the room of the dying Faith Sergeyevna. Leonard, without even greeting, started yelling at her. "Hey, Mom, what's this? Why is Claire here?" "Sonny, Lenny, is that you? God heard me. I didn't hope you'd show up. Where have you been all this time?" Faith Sergeyevna cried. "Cut the tears, Mother. I'm asking why she's on my legal territory," and he pointed at the entering Claire. "Or have you completely lost your mind and forgotten we're long divorced?" "Lenny, you were gone so long, I asked Claire to come. She's taking care of me." "She's taken care enough. Now let her scram right now," shouted the lady of Leonard's heart, who had been standing silent until then. "We'll take care of you." "Get out of here," turning to Claire, and threateningly said Leonard. Ignoring Faith Sergeyevna's objections, he began pushing Claire toward the exit. Claire, remembering what Leonard had been like in the last years of their marriage, and seeing what he had turned into now, understood that talking to him was useless, but still tried to appeal to his conscience in the only way that seemed possible. "I'll gather my things and leave now," Claire said as calmly as possible, "but you understand that your mother needs constant care. Can you provide that?" "That's what my Nata is for. She'll provide," Leonard declared, not too confidently.
I suggest this. I won't live here, but I'll come every day to Faith Sergeyevna to help her." A pause hung in the air. Leonard tried with the remnants of his mind to comprehend what Claire said and make a decision. "But you have nothing to pay me with," he finally said. Claire looked at Leonard with disgusted pity, and this was whom she had once loved. "I don't need anything from you. Just let me help Faith Sergeyevna. I ask nothing more from you." "Let her come if it's for free," Natalie chimed in. "But with treats, we respect that." Claire nodded silently and went to pack her things. Then she entered the room to Faith Sergeyevna, who had turned to the wall and was quietly crying. "Faith Sergeyevna, I have to leave now. Forgive me. If it were up to me, I'd stay." "No, daughter, I understand everything." Faith Sergeyevna turned her tear-stained face to her. "Goodbye, my dear." Claire felt very sorry for the elderly woman. As if sensing something bad, she delayed the moment of her departure. "I left all the medications on the nightstand for you. Don't forget to take them, please. There's a lot prepared in the fridge. They won't eat it all. I'll come tomorrow." "Where will you go now?" "Don't worry, I'll find housing somewhere nearby. Until tomorrow." And Claire bent down to hug the woman who had become dear to her. She found a place in a hostel. The next morning she ran to the market and store, bought groceries to cook everything fresh for Faith Sergeyevna, and didn't forget to buy a bottle of vodka, her pass into the apartment. She came, rang the doorbell. Behind the door she could hear someone arguing, the noise of breaking dishes. Claire rang and knocked, but no one opened for her. The woman worried greatly for Faith Sergeyevna. Though she rarely got out of bed, she could, in extreme necessity, reach the front door. How was the poor woman in such a monstrous environment? Claire went for the local police officer and called the neighbors. The door was opened only when they saw a person in police uniform through the peephole. Drunk Lenny stood swaying in the doorway. "What do I owe you to pleasure?" he slurred. Then he noticed Claire. "It's you, the restless one. Raised everyone on their feet. You need it more than anyone." What's with Faith Sergeyevna? What did you do to her? Calm down, nothing's done to her. They took her away last night. Mom got really bad. Which hospital? Answer. How should I know? Get out of here. Comrade officer, Mr. Policeman, I ask you to protect me from this crazy woman. See, she's stalking me, won't let me live.
But Claire wasn't listening anymore. She ran down the stairs, thinking where to start searching for Faith Sergeyevna. She began calling all nearby city hospitals. Some she couldn't reach by phone, so she had to go there herself. Finally, in one of the medical institutions, they answered by phone. Yes, such a patient had been admitted to them at night. They asked how she was related to her. Claire said, daughter. Come, your mother died this morning, they said, and short beeps followed. Claire buried Faith Sergeyevna alone. She tried to contact Leonard, but it was useless. Fortunately, a few days before, Faith Sergeyevna, probably sensing her imminent departure, convinced Claire to withdraw all the remaining funds from her card. It was enough for modest funeral. Claire returned to her native town. She had missed her Mary so much that she was ready to run ahead of the bus to meet her sooner. Seeing her, she grabbed her in an embrace and kissed her. They laughed, cried, told each other incoherently how they had waited for the meeting, how they missed each other, and both knew that now no force would separate them, that they were together, that they were family. A month passed. Claire was absorbed in the adoption process. Right after arriving, she switched to it. Collecting the necessary documents required a lot of effort and time. When at work they told her that some man was waiting for her in the director's office, Claire thought it was an official from the child services. She entered the office and saw a well-dressed elderly man. The man introduced himself as Alexander and informed Claire that he was an old acquaintance of Faith Sergeyevna, here on her behalf. He told Claire their story, or rather his and Faith's story. When they were young, Alexander was in love with Faith Sergeyevna, but she was waiting for her young man from the army, the future husband and father of Leonard. Faith, a deeply decent person, despite her feelings for Alexander, married the unloved one, keeping her word. For many years, Alexander and Faith Sergeyevna didn't see each other. When he met her in the hospital where he brought an acquaintance for examination, he recognized her, started asking questions. Faith had to tell Alexander about her terrible diagnosis. He began financially supporting his first youthful love. He had the means, he owned a law firm. So that's where the money coming to her card was from, Claire guessed. A few days before her death, when you weren't home, she invited me over and asked me to prepare some papers. Here, take this. And Alexander handed Claire a thick, large envelope. What is this? Claire asked, surprised. This is a deed of gift for the apartment in your name. Faith Sergeyevna really wanted it to go to you. In our last meeting, she gave me your address and asked me to ensure her will was carried out. And then, already after Faith's death, I didn't learn right away that she was gone. When I went to that hospital, I started asking the medical staff about her last minutes, hoping maybe she left some message for me. They gave me this, and he handed Claire a note. She immediately recognized the handwriting. It was the same hand that wrote the letter she received from Faith Sergeyevna. Dear Sasha, I want to thank you for everything you've done for me. You know you're a special person to me. My love, my unfulfilled happiness. Dear, I ask you once more to fulfill what I asked and help Claire. And if needed, with a good lawyer. I lost you once, and later I lost my beloved son, who doesn't need me now. So let my named daughter and the granddaughter I never had find their happiness, and I'll help them in that as I can. Claire carefully folded the note and returned it to Alexander. They both sat like that for a long time in silence, each thinking their own thoughts. Alexander remembered his faith with sadness,
thinking how things could have turned out for them. Claire pondered how her life had changed lately, as if up in heaven they suddenly decided to change her fate. She connected this with Mary's appearance, her little angel. Of course, it never occurred to her that she herself was an angel to the angels.